From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Voting centers are open across Venezuela as it tests its electoral system ahead of the May 20th election. 500 voting centers were open where election staff, voters, and inspectors all worked to ensure a seamless process ahead of the big day. The voting system in Venezuela is a fully automated process and can be audited in all its phases.
So this is just to explain. They aren't going to vote with this.
No, this is impartial. We are not here saying, look, vote for this candidate. No, this is only so that they are familiar with how to vote and how the presidential ballot will look so that they can take this into account.
So tell me something. After 21 to 22 elections, you already know how to vote. Is that right?
Well, we already know how to do this with our eyes closed, but this information is always good to have because there are people, for example, older citizens, who are more likely to make mistakes.
As well as new voters who are just getting into voting. This helps them get to know the voting system so that they know how to vote, how to use the machine in order to cast their vote. It always involves informing the citizen, more than anything.
President Nicolas Maduro himself participated in the mock vote. Attending a polling center in Caracas, Maduro walked through the steps start to finish, talking through the process. His visit to the voting center ended with an invitation for all to support the upcoming election. Following the voting walkthrough, Maduro sat down with Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez and other top officials present at today's election simulation.
I take my secret vote, which I'm casting, and immediately proceed to the electoral box, known as the ballot box. And I deposit my physical vote, which I had cast electronically, into this electoral box, just as in any country in the world. Venezuela has presidential elections on May 20th. I invite you to vote, and I invite the entire world to support the elections in Venezuela.
Our correspondent Ian Bruce sends us this report from today's simulation, voting at the Fermín Toro Voting Center in Caracas.
Since 8 o'clock in the morning, people have been queuing up here at the Fermín Toro Voting Center in Caracas. In total, there are 500 voting centers open for this dress rehearsal today across Venezuela. That's 1,200 voting stations, because each voting center has 2 or 3 mesas, as they call them in Spanish. Now, the purpose of this dress rehearsal is both to show that the voting process itself is trustworthy and robust, and also to teach people to familiarize people with the voting process. They're given a sheet like this. But of course, after more than 20 elections during the Bolivarian Revolution, many people really don't need to be taught how to vote. Let's go inside and see how it works. The voters queue up here, and as they come in, they move first to this table here where they present their identity card to check that they are registered to vote at this voting center. That also checks that they haven't voted, that nobody has voted with that identity card before. Then they put their fingers, a thumb, onto the machine, which takes their thumbprint, and that is checked against the database as well. So that's checked against the identity card to make sure it's the same person, and also that the thumbprint hasn't been registered as voting already. Then they go to the voting station, which we can't see the actual voting machine itself. For security reasons, we're not allowed to do that. But it's a touch screen. There's a list of the candidates which they choose from. It comes up on the screen saying, do you want to confirm that vote or not? They press that, and then once they've confirmed their vote, it prints out a paper register of their vote, and then they move on to the next machine. Now, this has been described by Jimmy Carter in 2012. The authorities here are fond of reminding us of this. It was described as, of the 92 elections that the Carter Center had monitored, Jimmy Carter said the Venezuelan process was the most reliable. This paper ballot is then like a double check which is then later audited to make sure it tallies with the electronic voting record. And finally, they come over to this table and they put their thumbprint there and they get indelible ink on their finger to show that they voted. Another safeguard. So all in all, this is the way the process works in Venezuela. They're just finishing there. This is the way the process works in Venezuela, and it really does seem to be a pretty robust election system, which is almost completely fraud-free and in basically fraud-proof.
In Nicaragua, members of the Commission for Truth, Justice, and Peace have been sworn in by the country's National Assembly. The 5-member commission includes people from different sectors whose objective it will be to understand, analyze, and bring clarity to the violence that overtook parts of the country last month. The commission has a period of 3 months to present the results of its work. Talks between the Colombian government and the ELN are due to begin in Havana, Cuba, next week. The announcement comes after a meeting in Venezuela was held to discuss the next move. Talks had been taking place in Ecuador, but Ecuadorian President Lenín Moreno pulled out, citing tensions on the border with Colombia. The talks between the ELN and the Colombian government will focus on the creation of a new ceasefire agreement. Barbados Labour Party BLP officially launched its campaign for the May 24th general elections Saturday. More than 20,000 people joined campaign liftoff, jam-packed with entertainment and fiery speeches. The BLP said it would cut out wastage, stamp out corruption, and reprioritize the country's expenditure. Opposition leader Mia Mottley promised civil servants who have been pushing for a salary increase for almost 2 years that she would be meeting with the trade unions shortly after taking office to discuss this issue. She also revealed that if it is determined that an increase cannot be immediately afforded, a living allowance would be provided.
We live in a great cause, in the cause of Barbados, in the cause of bringing a country back after a lost decade, is what has given us the solace and the inspiration to walk. But you have replenished us every step of the way.
The Barbados Labour Party says it has received hundreds of complaints from voters about irregularities on the voters list. They said some people were still listed at their old addresses even though they had completed transfer forms, in some cases as many as 10 years ago. The BLP said a letter had been sent to the Electoral and Boundaries Commission aimed at securing a meeting to have the matter rectified. Monday is the final day to register to vote. The BLP is launching their official campaign, revealing their list of candidates later.
The difficulty with this is that you're now requiring people to go to vote at addresses they no longer reside at and in those areas. So on election day, they're going to be required to go extremely long distances in some instances, which obviously, it becomes a difficulty. Now, some of these transfers have been submitted since 2017. So clearly there's been enough time to have these people moved to the correct addresses. This still has not been done.
The people of San Salvador Atenco demand justice. For 12 years, they fought against the government's construction of an airport. Eduardo Martinez reports.
The people of San Salvador Atenco have always been defenders of the earth. They live on the shores of Lake Texcoco, where now the government is building a new international airport for Mexico City.
We are not wrong. We love our fields, we love our way of life, our traditions, our customs, but we are facing corrupt institutions.
Since 2001, when the concept of the mega project was raised for the first time, residents of this area rejected the idea of their land being turned into a terminal, roads and shopping malls.
They are rubbing their hands with excitement with all the money they're going to make. These people have already made lots of money through infrastructure built with our taxes.
12 years ago, while they were preparing to protest against the presidential decree that evicted them from their land, the state and federal governments ordered the army to suppress them.
The cause for which our grandparents fought was for a life of respect, of freedom. Today, the same situation is being repeated, in another time and different circumstances. But the enemy continues to be the enemy of the people, those who have money and rule the institutions.
2 young people died after security personnel violently suppressed a protest. Hundreds of people were detained and dozens of women were victims of sexual violence. They eventually had to take their cases to international courts.
Nothing has changed in the 12 years since that day. Still no justice. They should punish not only the main perpetrators, but everyone else responsible as well.
With President Enrique Peña Nieto's rise to power, work on the airport was restarted in an even bigger way, and the government is vehemently defending now contracts worth more than $13 billion.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Antigua and Barbuda, tensions continue between the government and the Barbuda People's Movement over the Barbuda Land Act. BPM political leader Trevor is accusing the government of taking autonomous decisions which will affect the people of the Barbuda's land ownership. However, Prime Minister Gaston Brown says there will be consultation, but he accused the BPM of simply wanting to thwart any plans the government may have. So he's not giving the Barbuda Council any veto power on decisions made.
This government is going down a road to unilaterally make decisions for Barbuda without even consultation.
What section did you read?
Interpretation. What is wrong with consulting us on some of these matters? You're talking about a major development that's going to have a significant impact on the people who have lived there for over 300 years.
The reality is, Mr. Speaker, every time you mention anything about land reform in Barbuda, there are automatic threats coming from members of the BPM. We're not stupid. We know that any time at all we're to call a consultation to speak to land reform in Barbuda, that they will mash up the meeting. That's exactly what would happen. We know that based on how they have indoctrinated the Barbudan people, that there is no way that you could have a rational discussion about land reform with Barbudans. It will not happen. So to have called a consultation on this issue would have been an exercise in futility.
Foreign ministers from around the Caribbean will meet in the Bahamas next week to discuss Brexit's impact on the region. Ministers will meet on Monday and Tuesday. The meeting will also discuss relations with the United States, Canada, the Commonwealth, the United Nations, and other major institutions. Attention will also be given to issues relating to reducing CARICOM's vulnerability to disaster risks and the effect of climate change. Cuba has launched Operation Meteor to aid the island in preparing for any possible natural disasters. The nationwide initiative aims to mitigate the impact of natural disasters, especially in rural areas, and safeguard life on the island. Meteor will also connect with radio and television services, the island communication system, and the emergency network of the Amateur Radio Federation of Cuba to fine-tune their emergency responses. The operation is of special importance considering the coming hurricane season from June 1st to November 30th. The National Fair of the Agrarian Reform in Brazil, organized by the Landless Workers Movement, MST, is enjoying its final day. The fair offered more than 330 tons of food without pesticides, and more than 900 rural producers participated in the production of the food offered at the fair. Besides selling healthy food, the fair also presented various social activities and seminars throughout the weekend. Via the agrarian reform, workers are looking for greater social equality, a better distribution of political power, and for economic improvements. The state budget for bilingual education in Peru will be cut by half, and 1.5 million indigenous students will be affected.
The communities of the Amazon and the rural areas are the most at risk. 19,000 schools are in danger of disappearing after the government reduced the budget of 73 million soles in 2017 to 12,500,000 soles for this year, according to the Ombudsman's office.
The idea was for the budget to increase, to be able to fulfill the demand of pedagogical requirements. By 2016, we only had 21% of bilingual schools that had this strategy.
Intercultural education is a process that started 40 years ago in Peru and has a national action plan for 2021. In 2021, the state funding should reach 100%.
800 professors graduate every year from universities. We need 20,000. That means we will have to wait 20 years to cover the deficit of intercultural teachers in our country.
For Roger Rumril, specialist on topics of interculturality, the Peruvian state is dysfunctional.
This is a multilingual, multicultural nation. More than 60 languages are spoken in our country. On the other hand, we have a monocultural state of colonial origin. Therefore, the first step is a deep reform of this monocultural state to adapt it to this nation. If that step is not taken, nothing will change.
As well as bilingual education, justice, economy, and medicine, among other areas, are part of the reality that must be seen in a comprehensive reform of the state that works for the benefit of the people.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Lebanon, polls are now closed in the country's parliamentary elections, the first time voters have done so in 9 years. Hezbollah Deputy Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem can be seen here casting his ballot in the Sukak al-Blad district. Qassem wished success to the voting process and called for a high voter turnout. Top parties are expected to preserve a fragile power-sharing arrangement despite regional tensions. However, many will be watching to see if Hezbollah's political wing will be able to gain influence against the country's Western and Saudi-backed Prime Minister Saad Hariri. Pakistani Interior Minister Ahsan Iqbal was shot and injured during an election campaign rally at his home constituency in the Punjabi city of Nawara Sunday. The suspect, described as a man in his early 20s, was arrested immediately after the shooting and is currently in police custody. Iqbal is now reportedly out of danger, according to government officials. Pakistan is due to hold a general parliamentary election on 15th of July. In Afghanistan, at least 17 people have been killed and 34 injured after an explosion targeted a mosque. The mosque was being used as a voter registration center in the eastern city of Khost. Emergency services were deployed and ambulances moved the injured to a nearby hospital. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the explosion so far. Lava from a recent volcanic eruption has started solidifying on the streets of Lealni State in Hawaii's Big Island. This following the eruption of Kilauea volcano. Footage shows the lava cooling down and solidifying in the streets of a residential district. Hawaiian authorities had previously ordered the evacuation of surrounding areas. The lava fusion follows hundreds of earthquakes, which have been recorded over the past days, with magnitudes wavering between 2 and 5. And we return to Venezuela, where the electoral run-through in Caracas was a huge operation today. Now we're going to speak live with Jean-Pierre Anaya, an economist and professor at Universidad Bolivariana de Venezuela. Hello, Jean-Pierre. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about what Caracas was like today as you were around the city.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, I was today around the city. I am living in the neighborhood in the center of Caracas, where some of the schools that were used for the monk today. We can see a lot of people around. According to the Electoral Council, the monk was programmed until 3 p.m. It is now a little around 7 p.m. There is still people trying to go to the electoral school to move the system, not only to know how will the electoral pool will be, how the centers will be working, but also the parties are moving his people to know what obstacles they can have in the day of the election, how to move the time, how to move the mobilization that they need to move on the 20th of May.
Can you talk about the electoral system in Venezuela, perhaps comparing it to some other that you are familiar with?
Yes, I have been in another, especially in European countries and another Latin American countries. Yeah, first of all, we have a completely automated counting system, but it doesn't mean it's not checked up by humans. The system is electronically sent to the Electoral Council, where they give the total number at the end of the day. But in every pool, in every station, all the numbers are counted again, because the machine that we use have the electronic vote that you push a button, and this is the electronic voting machine, and then that prints a paper. At the end of the election, the member of the election center, they count again and they check that the number the computer is giving, it's accurate. So all the parties that have sent members to the electoral centers, they can check the sum that the electoral council is giving at the end of the night. That's why, for example, the electoral council probably take a long time. Take if the polls close at 6, the first bulletin is given at 12 or 11 in the night. But when they give the results, they almost always give results with 95% of the polls counted. They don't give a projection. They don't give an approximated number. They give a number when they have 95% of the voters counted. This is not like happened, for example, in Honduras, when the electoral center give one number and half an hour later another number, and the winner was another guy. No, and before the election, all the parties have the participation. And today, when we are 2 weeks before the election, all the participants, even the voters, are checking the system, are participating, are looking how the tables will be organized, all the people who will participate, and that's a vote of confidence that the people can have for the next election.
Now, international observers will again be monitoring this year's election. In your opinion, will the process be safe from criticism and cries of fraud?
I don't believe it is possible to make a fraud, because all the checks and balance that I explained you before are set up to prevent the fraud. But it's not free of criticism, because the interests that are against the election it's nothing to do with the electoral system. They are against the government. Even, I would like to say, a hypothetical case, if the opposition candidate win the election, if they are not ready to recognize this victory, they are the powers that are talking about our electoral system. They are talking just in case the winner will be President Nicolas Maduro. In that case, that will not recognize. But I will like to ask, what will happen if the opposition candidate win the election? What we can expect? Will the Colombian president will say again they don't recognize the election? It's not a technical problem. It's not a technical lack of confidence that they are showing. It's a problem of political interests that are colliding.
Jean-Pierre, thank you so much for joining us. That was Jean-Pierre Anaya, professor and economist at Universidad Bolivariana de Venezuela. More news now. The rise in the cost of rent in Spain is triggering an increase in evictions, and the tourism boom is only making the situation worse.
Tourists on trolleys looking for the address of their hotel is an ever more common image in Lavapiés. It's one of the oldest and most multicultural districts of the center of the Spanish capital, Madrid. The neighborhood has already been given the nickname Madrid's Hotel, and tourism is responsible for kicking locals out. Recently, the building Argumosa 11 was sold to a real estate company that then immediately requested that all the residents leave.
In my personal case, I don't have anywhere else to go. The center of Madrid is for rich people, and I live on a pension of 370 euros. And right now, there's no place available for this price.
In the last year alone, the average price for rent in the area has risen by 15%.
Greed is ruining everything. This rent bubble is fatal for us.
30 neighbors will be evicted from these houses. That will raise their rent to between 600 and 800 euros. These rates are unaffordable for the residents being kicked out.
My whole world is here, my social life too. I have been living here for 20 years. I have my doctor, I have my people. I'm already 68 years old, and it's difficult to get a job. I don't know what to do from now.
In just 2 years, Lavapiés has increased the number of vacation rental houses by 85%. The residents are facing a difficult problem as the housing companies aren't doing anything illegal.
It's so full of aggressive liberal policies that take away protection for citizens. There is no regulation in housing matters, and that lets private companies manage housing prices at will.
The neighbors of Argumosa 11 have organized marches for the weeks ahead to mark a neighborhood struggle. Their objective is to keep living in their city.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.